Today I'm going to start drawing the first page of my new comic, First Son and Sword. And I've already done the thumbnails and preparation drawings and my sketchbook dedicated to this. And we're going to jump in with measuring and then drawing the page. Okay, so this is the first page of my new comic, First Son and Sword. I had to think of the name for a minute. First Son and Sword. It's about first son and sword. Sword's the man. He uses a sword. He's sort of like a hired sword in a sword and sorcery kind of world. And he's got Pharaoh with him. She's also a mercenary that he picked up when she was younger. She kind of sees him like a father figure. And then there's First Son, which is a sort of a mythical person. He's apparently from the first peoples, so he has like super strength and healing and toughness, just from like the superior DNA and all that of being a first peoples. And there's legends about him. So Sword is sort of stuck trying to take care of this boy, kind of rambunctious kid. So that should make for a fun story in this sword and sorcery world. It's something that I could draw forever. I don't really have plans for how many issues I'm going to do or even how long this first issue is going to be. I'm not too worried about all of that. But I do have the story written, the first script, which is this one. And I have a lot of world building and story in mind for even towards an ending, even though we won't get there for who knows how long. So anyways, on this channel, I want to be sharing my process of creating and this comic book, creating art, and really just share my practice of sequential storytelling, of being a comic book artist and writer. I've learned a lot over these 8 years I've been making comics, but I know I have a lot more to learn. And that has always held me back, I guess, from really sharing my experience and what I'm doing. But I'm having this realization now that I am not an expert, and it's not that I'm pretending to be an expert, but that I do have my experience, what I've learned, what I'm currently learning and trying to do and failing at times and succeeding in other ways. And that experience is something I want to share with the community, to contribute to the overall knowledge and the practice and the art itself. So that's something I'm going to be doing with this channel. So I'm going to be showing a lot of spoilers, because I'm going to be showing my process of making this whole thing. So just some comments on what I'm doing here with this page. I'm trying to move around the page and not get bogged down in one spot with one drawing. If I get into a bit of a struggle on something, I try to take a step back and move to a different area. What we have here is First Son, the cloaked figure. He's the boy there. He finds some beetles in the desert and he's kicking them for fun. And they come up out of the sand. There's more of them. He kicks them again. And he's kind of lagging behind the rest, so they're not aware of what he's doing. And that's sort of our setup here for what'll happen. My pencils are pretty loose even when they're finished. But as long as the shapes are clear, that's the important part of it. I'll be able to find the blacks with ink when I go to the ink phase. But there's still a little bit of flaws and struggle in the ink phase because my pencils usually aren't that clean. And I'm kind of okay with that. That's part of something that I've learned, is to be making choices at every step of the process. And every phase of the process involves decision making and trying to find that fluidity and that like bringing something to life that you're trying to show, and that keeps it lively and expressive. So and it keeps it interesting and fun for me. So it is intentional as well that I don't have the tightest pencils before I ink. And now I'm inking. This is an 05 micron. Here on this panel, I started with the foreground because usually the foreground character will have the most contrast and most detail. So if I start with that and work my way back, then I know that each layer of background, midground, or things that aren't supposed to be the focus, I know to reduce the amount of detail I'm putting in. I find that a lot easier than starting with like the simplest lines and going towards the more complicated. Those big long lines have to be smooth because it's a desert dune. They're a little challenging. When I draw, I try not to rotate the page. Some of those lines would be easier to make if I, was turning my page back and forth to get a different angle on the line. I like to keep it just static and, in a regular orientation, and try to learn to draw with, good posture and a good position and make a line from any angle. Again, that has to do with my mindset, which is towards, a practice that's always improving. And for me, I would rather improve and learn how to draw in those different ways. One thing that becomes a challenge is with these little lines, I find myself starting to get more expressive and making much more complicated little squiggle lines. And I try to resist that urge, because once I start doing that with those little things, I might do it with the big things, and it becomes just bogged down. It takes a lot more time and is more bogged down. So I use a pocket brush, a Pentel pocket brush. It is a refillable ink brush pen. And I filled in the blacks already here. I didn't capture that on camera because the camera died or something. And now I'm erasing the pencils. I gave it a little time to dry first. At this point, I'm looking at the pages. There were choices made even in the brush phase where I filled in some areas that were not yet established with the micron ink pen. So I'm going to have to go back with the micron pen and clean up a few spots. And then I use a white opaque paint, acrylic paint, a brush pen to fill in any white spaces I want to put in there, or any lines I need to remove. And luckily there weren't too many on this page, too many things to change or adjust, so I did pretty well. I find it's maintaining focus. What am I trying to do right now? What's really the focus? And then, if I make a mistake, how did I get here? Paying attention to what you're doing. I find I can't really listen to things or even music sometimes while I'm making a page, because I don't want my mood to get affected apart from the mood I'm feeling from the story, from the visual, the expressions of the characters, their mood. Um, and I don't want my focus to be drawn away. If I maintain focus, not only can I learn at a much faster rate, but I can complete the page much more quickly and efficiently. And here's a closer look. Now, I will say, even after this final look at the comic, I did go back and make a few little additions to clean up a few shadows, like on the camel, that fell not quite where I wanted them. Okay, that's page 1. Overall, I feel like it was pretty successful, and it was definitely easier than when we're going to end up in the city later, and there's going to be a lot more perspective and background figures. Okay, so when I was working on this first page, some things I noticed was I am a little rusty on making pages, so the balance of how detailed to make my pencils before I ink, I don't think I quite had that right, but it turned out okay in the end with some backtracking and whiteout. It just slows down the process a bit, but overall I'm pretty happy with this page, and I look forward to continuing this effort of finding that balance, making simple lines and simple shapes here to communicate and draw comics quicker than I've ever done before. Okay, so this has been page 1 of my new comic, First Sword and Sun. I'm going to share my process making this comic here on this channel. Catch you next time.